As we're doing this, I'll introduce myself. I'm Rose. I just graduated from the NYU Science, Health, and Environmental Reporting Program.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So if any of you are, looking for someone to work for you? I do a lot of audio work, and I'm sort of obsessed with the way things sound. I worked at Radiolab for a little while, and now I'm a scientific American on it, and they let me play with sounds there also, and do podcasts for people like the New York Times and Storyflyer and all that stuff. So, I love podcasting, but that's actually not what this session is about. It's more about how you can use sounds in a story to kind of augment what you're talking about. And so I thought we would start with some really obvious examples, and all of these are on the wiki here. So there's not a lot of links, but if you want to find them later, they're there. Good, 404. Wonderful. Let's try it. Oh, okay. Well, at one point, Live Science had a story about piranhas. You probably all saw this. It was a little while back, and it was about how they bark.
You could probably take off the percent 20 at the end.
Oh, look at you guys are so smart.
Oh,
no. I don't know what I would do without you.
Nice to know.
Okay, so here is a story about piranhas that bark. And as you read the story, you're like, okay, cool, but what does that sound like? And it's not here. So here's the same story at The Guardian, and they put a little sound here. Let's see if it works. Can you hear that at all?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is a really obvious example in which you're writing a story about a sound that an animal makes, and you probably want to include that sound, especially when it's not an obvious sound. I can't really that a little louder. Okay. This is going really well so far. So this is an obvious example, right? Like, you want to put this out there. And so that's not really that interesting, right? Because it seems like something kind of obvious. Oh, yes. Now I know how to fix it. Very good. Okay. So here's another one where you got a story at Wired about are all of these on? I'll hold the microphones up here on. About whales and how whales will be disturbed by shipping traffic, and so you can hear it. In theory. There we go. Right, and so that's the sound, and then you get this other sound here also. I don't know if anyone heard that, but these are other obvious examples, like ammonia, whales, or birds, or things that are pretty easily findable, like a sound. And we'll talk later about where to find that sound, how do you get the sound of a humpback whale, where would you look for that? And we'll talk about that later. But these are just some examples that I wanted to start with. But then now I really don't want to talk the whole time, and you don't want me to talk the whole time. So I have some other things that I wanted to show, kind of some examples, but also talk to you all about how you if you've seen things that you like when people use sounds, or other times when it's just really cheesy and you're like, okay, it didn't add anything to the story. And then I guess at the end, if people have questions about logistically, how do I embed a sound, we can talk about that too. And it's super easy. Because I'm obsessed with, and of course I've done this again. How did that happen? Okay. Because I'm obsessed with Robert Krulwich, like anyone else who ever listens to NPR is, he did a story about sounds that have disappeared, and he just put all of the YouTube clips of all the different sounds in it. Which is a really lovely sound. So here's his story about old sounds, and then he later has a thing about new sounds. And so this is more of a story that's like actually driven by the sound itself, rather than a story that has a sound that you can then go like add to your story. One of the things that I think Robert does and a lot of people do is that they'll hear something, and this is kind of the thing that you do if you do a lot of radio because you're not really thinking about visuals at all, is that you hear something and you're like, oh, that's weird. Why does it make that noise? And then you think about a story based on that sound. So those are just other interesting ways to think about sounds. But now I actually want to talk about when, people are tweeting at me. It's vibrating and distracting me. So I want to do some examples of like whether you think that this person should have used a sound or not. So here's a story maybe you all read at one point, and it's really interesting about how many of you saw this at some point. Okay. So this is a story about why refrigerators hum, and it's on the wiki if you want to read it, and it's pretty interesting about sort of like a history of science and like cultural evolution of like there were two different kinds of refrigerators and one of them didn't hum and one of them did, and we wound up somehow with the one that does, even though it's a kind of less efficient, and it's sort of like an interesting history of science thing. And the question is, should this person have put a sound of a refrigerator humming in the story? Yes? Why? We all kind of know what a refrigerator would sound like.
I don't think it's particularly necessary for this story. Alice's story is a very good sort of historical account of the process of the things that are around us and how they came to be there. And as you just mentioned, we know what fridges sound like. And I think that sometimes having too many multimedia bells and whistles can detract from a very sort of clean story like this one is. Having embedded in audio sounds just to hear a fridge is not really I don't think it's going to add too much.
Plus, it's like white noise. There's nothing really happening when you're listening to a fridge. Like, it's the thing, I work in radio, and it's the kind of thing that you might actually have somebody unplug while you're there briefly, because it's this, like, white hum behind you. And so, there's nothing that's happening in that sound when you put it on.
Except I would say, having read this first paragraph, it says that the sound changes when the meter needs feeding. So that would be interesting to hear maybe. See if you could detect that change in sound too. But if it's just one sound, then that might be like, well, I want to know what it sounds like when it changes.
Also, I mean, I think there's all sorts of sounds that you're like, oh, I know what that sounds like, but because you take it for granted, you're never actually paying attention to it. So I think it would be cool exactly, like, how does the hum go? It's different than, like, the hum of, I don't know, something else. Like, I would include just for that, because you just don't necessarily think about sounds that are so common in your daily life.
So I think it depends on how well you can describe what you think the importance is. I mean, I've seen some really interesting descriptions of particular sounds in text without the sound associated with it. And some people can convey in that description a really sort of visceral feeling for the sound, and others maybe can't, and it would be more useful to them perhaps to have the sound be there than to people who want to maybe not have the distraction of multimedia launching or whatever and want to just somehow describe it. Maybe people feel like everybody knows what the sound is, but they probably don't. So, I mean, I think I have seen some really interesting descriptions of like animal calls or bird calls or whatever that don't have the sound there but describe it, and they don't need it.
And how distracting really is it if it's just a really short clip that you can click on? We don't find the picture distracting. We really want that picture there because that's how we experience the world. So I'm not sure if having just a really short clip that's easy to click on, easy to play, is that distracting.
Yeah, let's say in a web setting like this, what I would actually really want to hear is just the audio version of that first paragraph with her actually with her actually talking. So you hear the fridge, and she says, and I have to feed this meter. You're not going to hear just the fridge. You're going to hear it shift, and you're going to hear the coins clinking in the meter, and her kind of going, there it goes again. I've got to feed the meter. I guess that for me is kind of the sound scene that I would want to hear, not just the plain old buzzing of the fridge.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's two ways to think about it. Like one, and you all are thinking about it like almost like as if this was a podcast. Like if you were doing this as a radio piece, you would definitely want that, right? You'd want to have like, yeah, I mean like, oh god, the fridge, going over hearing the coins and hearing the whole thing. But this isn't a podcast, right? It's a written story, and so one of the things, and we'll talk kind of about this later, is putting a sound in a way that kind of gives people the choice of whether they want to click on it or not. So like if maybe after this first paragraph there was a little like, you know, little MP3 you could play, you don't have to play it if you sort of like, oh, whatever, and you just want to keep going. You can if you want to. But then it's also like, does it add anything to the story? And I think that's a really interesting question. I think every author is going to have a different answer for their own stories about whether they think it's really important or not. And like, I don't think anyone knows the real answer here. Like, I just think it's interesting about like, when, like, as someone who's kind of obsessed with the way things sound, I'm like, yes, like, more sounds, awesome. But like, other people are like, no, I don't need that. Like, I'm not, you know, someone who like wants to hear the sound. And also, I mean, it's interesting.
Sorry, just to follow up on the purpose to me. When you look at the different mediums, video, audio, print, to me they have different roles. And audio and radio is very much about, it's the emotion, it's sort of the painting images in your mind kind of thing. Which, if it's just a clip, using sound just to show something is like using, you're making a film just to, like, it's more like a snapshot, right? It's someone's little bad photo, look at this thing I have, versus like a photograph, like a nice artistic shot, and then using just, here's a clip of this thing I have, versus, whereas in a radio piece you have that scene. So I don't know if you're doing a print one, if you want to kind of half-ass the sound part of it, or if you should go all the way with it. That's my point.
Yeah, and I guess like one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this story is like someone, I think Lena might have said like, oh, also if you could say your names before you talk, so you don't meet each other, be friends. Like I was thinking when I was reading this, like I think I know what the fridge hum sounds like, but it is one of those sounds that you hear so often. Like, if you were to like right now think, what do the fridge hum sound like? Can you like reckon that sound in your head? And some people might be able to, like. Some people might not, so like maybe it is useful, like, or maybe it's not. Like sometimes domestic sounds are ones we take for granted, and sometimes it's nice to have them, you know, in there. And then like yeah, again, there's no right answer obviously, but I just think it's kind of an interesting question. And this is a very different example here. Do you see this now? About it has nothing to do with sound at all. This story, but. Like, do people know what an adagio sounds like? And should he have like included something that sounds like that? Or is that like really cheesy?
I think it would potentially be very cheesy to give me an adagio, but maybe there's a really lovely one. I don't know what an adagio is. Yeah, then I was about to say I'm a musician, so I might be cheating.
Yeah, I mean, how many people would have wanted it?
Right, I think, you know, like Cynthia, coming from a radio background, obviously that could be a great intro for a radio story. I think here, though, because he has illustrated the piece with a picture of a piece of music, that maybe having a small, you know, clip over there with a caption saying, you know, you can listen basically to this piece of music that we've showed you a picture of, that if somebody wants to, but not making it a really prominent part of it, yeah.
And it depends on the audience too. I mean, if it's an audience of musicians, then yeah, you don't have to put it up there. But for the general audience, like I don't know what an adagio is, so I would love to hear that.
I think it's interesting too because so there's the photograph there, the drawing there, and I don't think anybody would really question like its placement there, and maybe it's sort of a matter of we've all just gotten used to having visuals next to text and sort of what we're expecting whenever, because we've had a print sort of format, and maybe it's just we need to get more used to also having a button that you can press to listen to a sound and have that sort of be an expected part of our reading experience or anything sort of online.
But I think there's the question, you know, the cheesiness thing that you were bringing up. You know, what print and radio are just so different, and kind of thinking about how you can use different aspects together on the web where you have more potential. You don't want to, every sound you describe, all of a sudden, like, there's a little MP3 you can click. That I think, I kind of like what Heather said about having the sound that's kind of related to that specific piece of music, because then it's almost more put together. That it's not like the word adagio shows up and like, here's an MP3 that you would play with it, where there's a little more continuity to it. So I would just worry about just dropping in sound when there's a sound word, because when you read something, that has a different evocative effect in your head. You still hear it in your head.
Yeah, I think one of the big questions that I wanted to sort of talk about what you're getting at is like, when is it appropriate, and also how do you do it, right? Is it a link, or like, where do you put it,
Yeah, my name's Tom. I think, in television you write to video, and in radio you write to audio. So if you're going to be using audio, I think you should be writing to it rather than just having a link. In other words, that the text should relate to the sound that you're then going to hear, even if it's not going, on multiple audio channels at the same time, as it does in a radio piece. But I think you should be conscious of that rather than just dropping in links here and there. If you do that, it just seems like it's just not as elegant, I think.
I guess the other way that I've sometimes used audio in a blog format, other than where you've got very specific instances of sounds you really want people to, like the whale sounds or whatever, is kind of the way that video often gets used in blog posts, as instead of just inserting a picture halfway through the piece, you've actually got a little video clip that people can watch if they want. And sometimes using the audio that's not necessarily just ear candy, but is more almost like a little podcast stuck in the middle that's an aside or extra information in an audio format, that if they want a minute and a half of listening to something else, if they, almost like if they'd like a break in the middle of the piece and they'd like to hear the scientist explain this for themselves, and you've got a 30-second or minute clip of the scientist explaining it as opposed to the next paragraph where you paraphrase the scientist. And so using it that way, kind of interspersed, but not necessarily just, wouldn't be just the music or wouldn't be just the fridge.
Yeah, so for what you're saying is like having kind of a longer, more produced thing that is like part of the content rather than just kind of like a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, how long would you want something to be? Like, is there a limit? Like, if you see, when you click on to play something and it's like 6 minutes long, often, like, sometimes I'm like, 6 minutes, like, how, like, is there
If you're not going there to listen to a
Right.
podcast, then you're probably not going to listen to 6 minutes of audio.
Yeah. A minute and a half? Do other people, like, have, like, kind of ideas about where they would?
Maybe that's
Yeah, maybe less than that.
It depends if it's in line with the text. It probably should be shorter, but if it's like in a breakout box, it's a separate thing. Then, and it's a Radiolab episode. I'll listen to the whole thing, but
A whole hour?
yeah, but if it's in the text, I don't want to be pulled out of the story, So
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's a good transition into what I kind of wanted to talk about next, was like how to do this in a way that doesn't pull you out of the story. Like, where do you put the sound? Like, do you have it as a link? Do you have it just like embedded as like, we saw with the Piranha where it was just like a little thing in the text. And I think a lot of places are trying new things with this, almost like if like the Atavist has like it's sort of augmented content, and it's as you're reading the text you can kind of interact with it. And that's like hasn't really been executed extremely well on the web yet, although the Atavist is releasing their web thing soon. Let's. This is the same exact. So this is you cannot see this. Let's make it bigger and smaller. So this is something that the BBC did. Well, I'm going to describe to you what this looks like on my screen. But basically, you can kind of see they've got this is really a story about sound here. So there's very little text at all, and it's just like here's what it is, here's what it sounds like. And they've got it laid out in this kind of like blocky thing. Now, some people would argue that this isn't a print story. Like, there's like 100 words max with all the captions combined. But it is like, you know, a way in which we can think about and if your story is about how whales and boats maybe flash underwater in terms of like sonically, maybe this is a good way to present it. But I think it's just an interesting thing to think about in terms of like new ways to present sounds online in which people are really interacting with like what's going on here.
Can you scroll down or up to see
Yeah.
how it's presented? Or
Yeah, sorry that it doesn't, you can't really see what it looks like. But this is basically the whole thing. It just like kind of, it ends like here and over there. But so there's, I think, like 6 total boxes maybe. So here's the top and then,
And there's a story underneath? Like
I
up
thought
here?
there was sort of a,
yeah.
oh, so there was a story under
There's a story to go with it, yeah. It's here. And so it goes along. Doo-doo-doo. It's actually pretty long for, oh, that's cool.
So do you need to read the story to know the sort of context of how you should interact with the audio? Or is it just like, here's some random audio, just click on whatever you want?
That's a good question. I can tell you how I interacted with it, but I don't know if that's a good answer because I think everyone who sees this is going to maybe do it differently. I didn't read the story as much as I really wanted to like click on these first, and I think other people are going to want to scroll to the story and be like, okay, why am I presented with this weird thing on top? So maybe this is a good question of like, what are you going for, and does this work for everyone? Like, some people here would probably just scroll down and want to read the story first, and then be able to like go back up and play.
I guess I looked at it and took it as kind of the audio equivalent of when you get like a slideshow at the top of a longer story. And I think you're absolutely right. Some people will go to one of those stories that has a slideshow at the top and look at the first photo and read the story and maybe come back to the slideshow, whereas other people are going to flip through 30 photos and maybe read the story. So, I mean, I don't know that you're going to get one format that works for everybody for a story that's so heavily oral. Maybe this is, you know, like I said, maybe having the audio equivalent of a slideshow is the right way to do it. To really put those first and foremost.
Like a slideshow or a text article or anything, it's, you know, what's the point? Why am I interested in this? And does the title tell you that?
Yeah, listening to the ocean.
Sorry that this isn't fitting on.
Is there a sound associated with the earthquake one? Can we listen to it? Or just-
Down here? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is the sound of the earthquake. It's awesome. I mean, not awesome, but
It's not.
it's not playing. Oh, okay. I can send it to you. I've got it on my computer. The MP3.
Just put it on the keyboard.
Yeah, I'll put it on the Wikipedia. Yeah, it's actually really interesting. They came out with sort of like what it sounded like underground, like the sound of the earthquake.
I have a question. It's a bit jumping from this, but anyone who's ever done radio knows how hard it can be to get good sound. Just to isolate that one as you want without expensive equipment is especially hard. So, sort of for people who are not radio people, they have a blog or they're scientists, what would you sort of say to them about trying to start using sound? Let's say they have a lab and they think whatever they're working on is particularly interesting. Just sort of how and why would they do that?
That's what this whole session is about. That's a very good question. And there are a couple of like technical ways in which I would talk to people about, especially if you work in a lab, about if you really want to record something that's happening in your lab. But I'm actually going to hold off on that because we're going to do that towards the end of like where to find sounds and how to record them. But I do want to talk about that because that's like, right, because bad audio is bad, like, and it's really bad. And there's a lot of really, really bad audio out there. It's like really distracting. You don't know what you're supposed to be listening for, and then it's like really noisy. And yes, we will talk about that. Before we do, though, I do want to talk about this. I don't know how many people saw this. This is a New York Times feature, and if you haven't read it, I totally recommend it. It's like kind of like world shattering, or at least I thought it was. Even if you're not into hockey. Oh no! Oh, I touched it. Okay. But for our purposes, what I want to talk about with this is the way that they put, the way that they sort of incorporated the audio, so and like the multimedia sort of components in general. But so they tried to do kind of something like the Atavist does, where you have the story and then you can click on various things. And of course, I haven't found the place where there's some. Like, so here's you got a photo, but in some of the places there's actually audio, and I've lost it. Watching me scroll is probably really, really interesting. But anyway, so just pretend that I found it, and that this was like an audio clip. They talked to his mother at one point. This is about a hockey player who was an enforcer. So an enforcer is someone who is basically there to fight on the ice. And it's a really interesting story about this kid who becomes this enforcer. He's the enforcer in the NHL, and he winds up dying at a very young age and having a lot of brain trauma because that's what he did as his job. And it's like a really interesting story about this and sort of his life. But this is the first time the New York Times has really done something like this, where they've tried to incorporate the multimedia like really in the text. And this is also on the wiki, and I recommend looking at it in terms of like an example of like, does this work for people or does it not? You know, and I was like, talking to people yesterday about this, and like some people were like, no, I want to read the story, and because it's a very engaging story, it's almost like a New Yorker like long thing that you really get into, and you don't want to be interrupted often when you're like really into the characters, almost as if you're reading fiction. You don't want to like stop. But other people were really into the fact that you could, and I don't know why it's doing this, but you could go and you could watch the interactive video, or whatever it is. Thank you, New York Times.
Dus niet alleen staat de skates die daar aan de ijs en moest de roeping en dat was out there.
Derek Booger fought his way to center ice as...
Well, I can't make this go away until I pay them, so no, just kidding. Anyway. So that's the question is like, what works for you all? Like, do you want the audio embedded like that, or would you rather have it as like a thing that you can see the audio, or like what do you think works best? And if you have examples that you can think of, I will pull them up if I can. Like, how many people here just want to read the whole text? They don't want to be interrupted.
As long as it doesn't automatically go to that thing when if you happen to put your mouse over it, I think it's
right,
fine.
right.
You know, it's because then you can read it without. It's not really interrupting at all. It's just it's a pretty nice idea, actually.
My comment on this, I like having videos, I can click on our sounds I can listen to, and interactive videos are useful with the apps and stuff. But I dislike when it opens up a second window that's sort of on top that I can't like listen and scroll or read the things. When it's interfering with me and I'm like, I can't find the close box, I can't. That irritates me, and then I'm like, this isn't giving me what I'm looking for. I may or may not stick around, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's nothing more annoying than like opening a website and then like some sound starts playing and you like can't figure out how to turn it off.
I think a lot of it depends on what the relationship is between various sounds or videos and the text. Do the sounds serve the text, or does the text serve the sound? Do I need to listen to the sound in order to understand the text? And if so, then I don't want to click a link. I want it to be embedded there, so that as I'm going down the column, I understand. First, I read this paragraph, and then I listen to this song or whatever, and then I read this paragraph. Because my perception is, if it's like in the sidebar, or if it's the header, instead of a header image, I have those sounds. My understanding is that it's like supplemental.
Yeah, and same thing I would say with that style of the links there. That was in the.
Yeah, sorry, it's gone.
Yeah, from the New York Times piece. Right. I would say that implies that those are extra bells and whistles if you want them. Mm-hmm. And so I think it does just really depend on the nature of the content and how integrated and integral it is to the story that you hear those sounds.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things, and this is something that I know people that work for the Atavist talk about a lot, is that you are still a storyteller, right? And you're a journalist and you're telling a story. And in some ways, you do want people to interact with that story in a specific way and in a specific order. You have a structure that you build, and you spend a lot of time thinking about that structure. and you don't want people to miss something that you want them to watch. Like if it's something that's very important to understanding, like you said, like the part of the story or the thing that they need to get out of the audio, that's going to be different than if it's something that's like kind of a cool side thing that you think is interesting, but you don't need it to finish the story or any of that. And I don't know, I honestly haven't seen anyone like really nail this online at least. If you have, you should tell me because I want to see it. And I think part of that is because people do interact with stories differently. Everyone does. So like, there are some trends, right? Like some people, like there's the question of like, okay, I don't want it to pop up over my text so I can't see anything else, or I don't want it to start playing when I don't ask it to start playing, or whatever. But I think a lot of people have different ways in which they want things to be presented to them. And that's, I think, super interesting about like why and how do you tailor stuff to that. So before we move on to like technical stuff, is there any other thoughts about like that kind of stuff?
Well, just taking off what you said, I mean, I think the key is having a variety of options available to suit the different ways that people ingest media. So, I mean, at the same time, have a coherent piece. I mean, that's a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah.
That's the ideal in my mind.
Yeah. You're not raising your hand. Oh, sorry. And now I was like, I'm sorry. That was bad. Okay. That was bad. Okay. So yeah, shifting gears, and I'm also like, I think about this question a lot. So if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards about like other stuff and like various ways to build, I have some plans that I'm patching for various Firefox and Chrome extensions to like be able to let you build your own interactions text and stuff. So if you want to talk to me later about that stuff, we can. But for now, let's move to like how. Okay, so like I want to have sound, and I don't know what to do or how to get it or where to get it. So recording sound, as you all know if you've done it, is like really hard. Especially like one of the big barriers to sound, like often in video, is that it's kind of expensive to get a nice microphone and blah blah blah. And I mean, I don't have nice equipment. Like I'm broke, So like it would be great if I had a nice, shotgun mic and all that stuff, but I don't. And I think for a lot of purposes, actually, you'd be surprised how good your smartphone is at recording. And I know like radio people are going to cringe a little bit. When sometimes I get reactions like, no.
Actually, I'm really curious about, I went from, so I've been working in radio for about 12 years, something like that, a little more. And I just went from a really dumb phone to a smartphone. And I have my expensive equipment, and that's what I use. But, I put an app on it that makes it a better recorder, and then I know that there are like $50 mics you can get to plug in. I haven't played with them, but they seem to be getting pretty good reviews. And that's a pretty cheap entrance level.
One place to look, if you're looking for equipment suggestions, and particularly looking for less expensive ways into things, is transom.org. Transom.org has all sorts of, there's a whole section of the website, it's a public media website trying to encourage more people to produce public media. And one whole section of it is tech reviews. And so, equipment reviews. And so, that's one of the places where like they've reviewed the Blue Mikey, which is a little, Blue Mikey. It's what you said, basically a $50 USB mic that you can plug into the top of your iPhone or the top of an iPod, and maybe not get full shotgun windscreen quality sound, but you've at least then got a decent external microphone that really, because at this point the technical limitation is the microphone, is not the recorder itself. Pretty much any smartphone has enough memory and the capacity, the sample rate to record really high quality sound. Is just getting high quality sound in there and whether or not those built-in mics actually have it.
Yeah.
And I use my smartphone actually I've used it for some interview settings. If you're in a quiet office or something like that, just leaving the internal mic on your phone will work. But
I teach at the University of North Carolina. We have an audiovisual specialist in journalism school. He reviewed all the under $150 digital voice recorders that would be used with a professional ultra voice microphone. So you're not recording with the device. But his favorite, I think, price-wise, if you've got like a $125 limit, was the Zoom H2 digital voice recorder.
The new one, the Zoom in the past with the external mic sounded horrible.
The Zoom is much better now.
This is
it's much better now, yeah.
The Zoom H2 digital voice recorder, $110 on Amazon. And he consulted with NPR correspondent in this area, and the NPR, Adam Hochberg, who does our radio program. He's the teacher of it. And Adam thought that was broadcast quality. Maybe not NPR Washington, but close.
No, actually, I know reporters at NPR in Washington who have almost entirely switched to their smartphone as the recorder, as long as you have an external mic. They're getting an external mic.
And I would also say that
it's getting less.
But what's the adapter?
Yeah, and NPR and I think radio is getting less.
What's the adapter they use to adapt the smartphone for an external mic?
It just plugs into your headphone jack.
Yeah, you can get XLR to 3.5. Just plug in.
Yes, I think that also I would say that if you want to do an interview with someone and you want to record it, and like phone tape, it sounds bad often, when you're like on the phone. What you can actually ask them to do is they often will have a smartphone, have them turn on their recorder and set it in front of them, and it'll record them. It's not going to be like the highest quality audio because you're not using an external mic, but it'll be better than what you're recording probably on your line. And then you can sync them. I use this. This is an Adderall. It's $150, and it has the dual mic and everything. So so Transom has great suggestions. Air also has really good suggestions, and I'll put all the links for all of those things on the wiki if you're interested.
Can you get the Air links if you're not a member? Can you access them?
I don't know.
Because to access the discussions, you have to be a member.
I don't know if the tools section is also behind it, but if you're a student or affiliated with the university, Air membership is really cheap. And if you're interested in audio, it's super useful. People there are really, really nice, and they've answered my really stupid questions many, many times. So, but if you're not interested in going on recording, like if it's a sound that you can't record yourself, like a koala that's making that weird noise, like I don't have access to a koala, so unfortunately, places that you can go for sounds that you yourself cannot record. There are a number of websites. One of them is freesound.org. Another one is the U.S. government has this great archive of old tape from various things, which you can lose hours and hours going through if you are like me. But so I have a whole list of links of those, and so I'll post those also on the wiki where places you can go. But also YouTube. If there is something that was recorded as a video, there are various ways that you can just take the audio from that instead of having to embed the entire link. You do want to make sure that you're not like stealing audio. Like just like with pictures, you have to give people credit where you got the sound from. I think people forget that a lot of the time. Also, when you're using music on your blog, you're fine if you're not making money from it. But like, just be careful with using like copyrighted songs and stuff. No one's gonna come after you, but like, it's best practices. Then there's also thanks, Lena. So there's a number of places where you can find these sounds from. And also, don't underestimate asking a researcher if it's an animal of some sort. Most researchers who work with animals or work with things like have recordings of their stuff. Also, zoos often have recordings if you do animal stuff. I mean, like, animal sounds are always fun. People love them. Like, they're sometimes cheesy when you add them because, like, really, people don't know what koalas sound like, but they do know what most other animals sound like. So, but you can't ask. I mean, like, and really, you'd be surprised how easy it is to be like, hey, do you have an audio file of that? And they'll be like, yeah, I do. If you're covering a paper and they're talking about audio, but they don't have it in supplemental materials, they often do actually have it in their computer. So those are just some like random places that you can get sound from. And then embedding them, I mean, that's going to be partially up to what your CMS is if you're working for a place that has a CMS. So if you're using WordPress, It's super easy. You can click on the little music button at the top and you just upload it. They do have like a file size limit, which I think is pretty small, but if you're using an MP3, you're fine. Other CMSs are going to be like sort of whatever they have. I know like some places, like I was talking to somebody at I think Live Sciences, and like they just don't have the capacity to upload the sound. So like I don't really know how to deal with that, but you should just like talk to your people. But a big thing that a lot of people use is SoundCloud. It's really easy. You just upload the sound, and they give you an embed link, just like it's YouTube, but it's just the sound. So that's what this looks like. So this is really easy, and you can just have all the sounds you want on there. One of the cool things about SoundCloud is that people can have timed comments. So like if you've got a sound that's a little bit more complicated than just a koala making weird noises, I could comment at like, a minute in and be like, hey, this part is really cool. And then you can, when you're listening to it, you see other people's timed comments. Some people hate that. Other people like it. So it just depends. Sometimes the comments are really dumb, like, cool. Thanks. But other times it actually is useful, especially when you have something that's a little bit more complicated than just like a refrigerator hum or a koala or something. If you've got like something that you've produced, like an interview with someone, people can actually post time comments, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and this is a sound that I actually got from YouTube, and I emailed the person who posted the sound, and I asked them like, hey, would you be cool with me just pulling the sound from this and like making sure that you give them credit? You don't always have to email, but I kind of think it's nice. Just to like tell them that you're using their stuff. Just like seems to be the right thing to do. But I don't know what the rules are on that, to be perfectly honest. I think that there was a Know Your Digital Rights session that I probably should have gone to. But I'm pretty sure as long as you're crediting it and it's a blog, if it's your own blog, then you're probably fine. Tell me if that's not true. What else should we talk about?
I have a question about SoundCloud. I just recently downloaded the app.
The app, yeah.
Where you can record and it directly uploads to your account. I haven't actually tried that. So is the quality with that okay? Have you gone directly from the app to upload?
I don't use the SoundCloud app. However, what I would assume is that the SoundCloud is just going to pull whatever audio you're giving it. So if you're using like an external mic and you're using your smartphone, whatever audio that you've uploaded, and you can usually say if it's a WAV or an MP3, it's probably an MP3. I'm assuming that the app is just pulling whatever you're giving it. I haven't used it, so I don't know for sure. There's a big so you want high quality audio, and like a WAV file would be much higher quality than an MP3. However, if you're just putting up a koala making weird noises, maybe not that big a deal. If you're broadcasting it on NPR, much more of a big deal. So like, I think it would probably be like audio quality wise, I would assume it would be fine, but I haven't used it.
Can you post on your wiki the level,
different
types of?
Yeah.
Because I don't understand it.
Sure. Yeah.
I understand it for pictures, but I don't know it for.
Right. Yeah. Totally. I have a little guide I can just post. Yeah.
When you were talking about recording on the phone, and I think that's a great idea. Just ask them to use this, but I was trying to look at a tutorial on YouTube about how you can use Skype now, and you can do like a two-way. Like if you format yours a certain way and they do theirs, you can both be recording through Skype at the same time. Have you ever done that? Because I had a lot of trouble actually setting it up.
I haven't done. So I use the Skype recorder that you can buy. It's like $20. It's called Ecamm, and that's what I use. With Skype recordings, the quality is completely dependent on your internet connection. So if it sounds weird because your internet connection is weird, then it's going to sound weird in your recording, and B, whatever microphone you and your person are using. So if they're using their built-in computer mic, often that sounds weird. You get like an echo of like they're hearing you out of the speakers, and then you're hearing you, and then it gets weird. So if you do end up recording someone on Skype and with like either a recorder that you buy or whatever, make sure that both of you are wearing headphones or like a headset type thing. Headphones are fine, just because if you're not wearing headphones, then you're going to hear yourself twice, and that's going to get picked up because it's coming out of their speakers and then being recorded by their computer back in. I definitely made that mistake, and it's awful. because you just can't use it. It just sounds terrible. So I don't know about the setting it up like a tutorial. I don't know if was that like through Skype.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
If there was like a YouTube tutorial from some guys who had tested.
Okay.
It was really interesting seeming, but
Impossible to
it was
follow.
kind of complicated.
Yeah.
And I tried to follow along, but then like my speakers just weren't doing what they said.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can post the link to the one I have, which is like $20, and it's been totally fine. So it's called Ecamm, and that's what I use. But I don't know about setting it up through Skype.
I've never gotten very good sound out of Skype, but PBS NewsHour, actually for video blog posts, but the audio quality is still pretty good. What they do is a phone interview where you're actually hearing the questions from the interviewer over the phone. You can do that on speaker, but then you record yourself actually on a Mac, which is like photo booth. And then FTP that to them so that you don't have that issue of the Skype echo when you're actually trying to use the computer as the means of talking to each other as well. And then you can just cut that or pull the audio from the video and like that.
That's smart. That's really good.
Skype also recently, maybe the last year, rolled out a new compression format that they used. It's like a high bandwidth audio format. So it's only for Skype to Skype, and so I think it's like lossless or something. So it's going to be a lot better than telephone.
Yeah,
you still get you get lag and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. If you can get the person also to be on Skype when you're recording, that also definitely helps because otherwise they're still going to sound like they're on
And
the
you
phone.
can just turn off the video so you can keep your pajamas on.
Right. Yes, that's key.
It's key.
It's very important. Yes. Yeah. So the recorder, they can be on Skype also rather than calling a phone. That would be ideal. If you have to call a phone, call a landline if you can. Cell phones are bad. And a lot of this stuff is also on Transom. They have a lot of like kind of how-tos about those kinds of things. So I would definitely recommend checking that out, and I will put the link to that on the wiki as well. And so we are close to our time. Yeah, 4 minutes.
One more thing, we're doing a Sounds of Science podcast, so if y'all of you want to record anything cool you hear over the next 2 days with your phones, and then email it, Rose has an email address.
Yeah, so I'll just write it. So we're going to do like a crowdsourced podcast. So you have all of your phones. You probably all have smartphones. I feel sometimes when I go places and I'm like, if you have a smartphone. Here I'm like, you all have smartphones. So it's sciosounds@gmail.com. And what we're going to do is put together like a kind of like soundscape of people's sounds that they've recorded during the conference and sort of mash it up into like, what does Science Online sound like? So far, no one has sent us anything, so send us something. Now you know how. And if you want to talk about other stuff like tech stuff, I am obsessed with tech. So come talk to me. I have cards in my nice little case. Yay. Thanks for coming.